9 o'clock, we will go ahead and get started. The Open Meetings Act is located on the wall over there by the door. And if we could go around and introduce ourselves. Mary Ann Borgeson, County Board.
Ben Gray, Omaha City Councilor.
Ann Carlson, County Administration.
David Levy, Baird Home Law Firm, here as representative of the Omaha Housing Authority. Georgia Chill, Building Capital.
John Christensen, Building Commission.
T.J. Morgan, County Board. Joe Lorenz, County Finance Director.
Bruce Carpenter, HDR.
Joel Peterson from Baird Home. I'm legal counsel for the JCDC.
I'm Don Woolman with Burlington Capital.
Chris Rogers, County Board.
Bob Parent, Architect.
And Bob.
Jody Campbell, Clerk's Office. Kim Boylan, Clerk's Office.
Wade Aaron, HDR. Adam Charleston, West Blackwell.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. We need, first item is the approval of the minutes of the December 10th, 2018 meeting. Is there a motion
So
to
moved.
approve?
Second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Item 2, are there board comments at this time? Okay. Item 3, a project update, and we have kind of a team that will go down the list and start with Commissioner Rogers and George Achola, who will talk to us about our project programs and services work that we've been doing.
Okay, good morning,
Good
everybody.
morning.
Good morning.
Let me start back by putting this in perspective. So I'm gonna start with last January when LB 1112 passed. So when LB 1112 passed, the state started putting in place a statewide process to try to prepare the programmings for when 1112 takes effect in July 1st of this year. Now, for those that may not know, 1112 was merged into 670 last year, and it basically says now that a kid, to step back even further, an adult, a person serves out their term. In juvenile, you don't serve out your term. That term is used, it says, is to be a placement. In juvenile placement, you cannot serve out placement as a final term. So our facility there is a holding cell. Either you're waiting to go, if you did a heinous offense, go down East Omaha, or you're waiting to go to placement. The law passed says you cannot sit there if you don't have placement. So kids that need a next level of service cannot sit there because that's not available. So that started a year ago. With that, when that started, we started meeting and putting in things to be in place. So the first set of programs that are set to come on board with that is one is a concept with UNMC, Creighton University, and Charles Drew. That is meant to get at the delay in the system of people being released when the evals are slow and being able to have med management, also some type of stabilization with behavioral health and other pieces. That was approved by the board in February, and right now they're waiting for some logistics for that to start here, hopefully next month.
And Region 6.
And Region 6 are. That's already there in the facility. What this does is close those gaps. So the third program that has begun is a program with the Child Savings Institute. That program was scheduled to start this month. It's delayed because of a situation with in sieges. And basically, the quick part of it is there's some regulation that have to be in place when you have a computer there. Nobody else can see the computer. It has to be monitored, things of that sort. So they're waiting for somebody in the state to come in and bless that. What that's going to do is use Child Savings Institute as a crisis stabilization place where they will, instead of having them go to the detention center to sit to resources there, they're going to hold in Child Savings Institute. The police and everybody has signed off on this to do it, so Child Savings Institute will put the services and connect those together in place. The next piece that, and let me note that all of this, we don't have a direct say, but there's a close partnership with the county in regards to probation. It's a state function under the court, but we provide space and everything else, so there's a partnership. Mary Bisick and her team has been leading this effort to put those in place. The other piece that they're doing now is some crisis stabilization pieces with girls with Utah Holly. That piece is in place with Utah Holly, and now they're getting ready to set and move with that from that programming piece.
And that will be 18 beds.
Yes. The boys piece, that hasn't gotten solidified yet, but they're in talks with the Omaha Home for Boys to try to provide that. There is another effort that came on board with the Omaha Home for Boys here recently, and they talked about it yesterday at the ATD committee meeting. It's a form of day reporting that's not traditional in the aspect of just day reporting, but it's heavily favored in regards to like behavioral health and things of that sort. So Omaha for Boys has made some beds and services available where kids can come there as day reporting. You have some of those behavioral health and other things managed there during the day, so they don't have to be in the detention center to manage that. That's up and running right now. The other pieces in place for the bigger picture aspect of this is about 2 weeks ago, Marianne brought in a group called Promise. What Promise is basically a way for us to solidify and get a better management on our data. Right now we have data everywhere, but it's spread out in certain places. So for instance, with JDI, with their process, we use this thing called the QRS, and that's what we've been operating off detention from. And then everybody else has other pieces. What Promise does is it has, it's a private partnership. What they did is they identified us through contact with Marianne to partner with us in regards to some of the things that we were doing with juvenile justice. So there, we get a break in some respects with that. They want to pilot with us. They gave a presentation to a lot of people inside, and what they want to do is start with 3 departments more so. The departments we're talking about that's not finalized though are DCYC, probation, and the courts. That gets us all the relevant information to go. So we're going through that process with Promise to get that on board. People that were there are excited. Ray Curtis, particularly at the course, was excited to do that. And what the end result of that will be is it will give us some analytic data to kind of say, for instance, the example she gave with some other counties she works with is juvenile goes to a program. The analytics tells them that this kid doesn't perform well in this program from this time of day. That allows you to go deeper and kind of get in with the family and then say, well, this may not be working for that kid. We need to readjust. So to use a sports analogy, I asked her the question, can we play money ball? She said, yeah, you can play money ball. And so the other piece, too, going on is this piece with 1112 started way back before the building project really picked up steam. So in addition to that, what's going on with OYS and JDI, there's a small group of decision makers for us that have been meeting regularly on a monthly basis, which is Judge Kaler, Public Defender's Office, Don Klein, myself, and Mary Bisick to really talk and dig in about what do we need to do to really move the wheels. And so from that discussion, we have our expediter that we put in place. And there's some talks through some other committees where I've asked them to make some recommendations back up to the board about how can the expediter be tweaked, because it's still within the year and we know that's going to take a little bit of time to be done, what things they can be done more to move some stuff to the system. So there's some talk now about probably doing a dual role in probation to work with ours to be able to handle some specific things. So I say that in respects to note that the programming piece, there's been a lot of questions coming up about saying, what individuals have been asking, give me the program that you have like right now. And the question that I've been saying and that I've been validating with people in the field is, you can't, from a program perspective, pull something off the shelf. How we've been doing it for the last 10 years is basically from the things that I've given you. It used to be Heather Briggs over in probation and I meet weekly. We've incorporated that now into a monthly meeting where it's Heather Briggs, Mary Bisick, and Judge Kaler and myself. And we basically look through that census. And based on those numbers and what's there at the time, you start creating the program from what's there. There's some basic elements that we have out in the community. The process of creating the program is pretty much saying to CSI, they're in this game for juvenile-wise. Mary goes to CSI based on that data and says, do you have the capacity to ramp up and get into this? If they're willing, they step up into the plate. And the process, the real question is, do you have the resource and the funding? Based on the commitment that we have, from Sherwood as a partnership for the funding, that's not really an issue. The question is to make sure we have everything set up right now. Utah Child Savings Institute has expanded this program currently based on CBA money from the state. So there was some money reallocated from this year that's going to them, and they're in the package next year that starts in July to start that program. So if it's ever asked in regards to the concern about the program, and this is the way you've consistently done programming youth-wise since we've been there, because the big piece that's been pointed out to me, and the judges will say, juvenile programming is about individual families and individual kids, and you don't pre-package those to some degree. You have resources you need, and you try to meet that need. So that's kind of what's been going on from the programming aspect.
Great. Any questions or further comments? Okay.
The only other last piece I'd add, just to make sure to put it in context, when the discussion comes up about the building, it seems to be talked about as the building and not the program. The program piece is now. LB 1112 and 670 is now. The program piece will be operating now into whatever to meet that need, and that buys a whole lot of time before anything is complete for us to be ready to roll.
Perfect. All right. Anything else?
No, I just think this is one of the things, just to kind of put into context what Chris was talking
Chris,
about.
you can just sit there.
Yeah, is basically, this is the diagram. At the center of all this is the design with co-located services. That's kind of the hub of this entire thing, and you see all those things that are around it. So, kind of like Chris, I was not really sure how you quantify or how you put into perspective all the programming the county is doing to prepare for 1112, and also other best practices that are going on across the country. So I think this diagram kind of lets you know all the types of supportive and other services that the county is putting into place that hopefully will support the co-located services concept, because I think part of the discussion that's been going on, I think we've been focused so much about the building, and that we have forgotten that the building is a part of the programming. It is part and parcel of the programming. You cannot, if you try to separate the two, it's not going to be sufficient. It's not going to be on best practices. So I think as we look at this, I think it's best to look at it. This is a part of the programming as well. So those folks that keep asking questions about programming, I think there's services, there's programs, but the building is also an essential part of the programming, especially when you have it designed so that you can have all those co-located services that we're talking about all at one location for the families of the community.
Yep, very good.
Right.
Well said. All right, we'll move on to Bruce.
So I think what Chris pointed out is all the good work that the county commissioners have been doing to implement these programs. And there's a lot of things going on just looking through that list. And there's others, meetings with the families at the youth center, community meetings that have been initiated by the pastor, I believe, Cabot, right. So a lot of other things that are informing the design and reinforcing the idea, as George said, that all of the co-located services make this work to improve, to transform the juvenile justice system. And so when we began this design, and really when we get involved in the design, we're not just looking to place people in spaces, we're looking to make a transformative gesture in the community, and in this case it's reducing the time that kids are in detention and the number of kids that are in detention. As Chris said, detention is not a punitive, it's not punishment, it's a holding place, and it's intended to be restorative. So all of these programs, when a kid makes a mistake, and if you've had kids growing up, it's pretty easy for kids to make a mistake. So how do we look at that and provide services to help those kids at a time that they're in trouble, and also in what's trauma situation for the kids. They're taken away from their homes and placed in a different environment. So the trauma-informed design is important, and recognizing what the kids are going through, and then how do we support them. And this leads to a longer view to keep them out of the correction system. So what can we do to change the trajectory or the direction that these kids are headed? And if you look at the adult corrections, the overpopulation, this is an opportunity to impact that. So everything that we're doing, all of the committees, the meetings, the studies with Promise and Burns Institute, and everything that's being done is focused on those things. How do we reduce the time, keep kids out of detention, find alternatives? Douglas County has been involved in JDI for a decade or almost, and has made tremendous progress to get from maybe 188 to down to from 210 down to 77 on Tuesday, I heard. But that's not the end. We need to keep moving in that direction and continue to find alternatives to detention. So if we look at other communities of our size and demographic, in the 25 range is typical, 25, 30. So we still have opportunity to improve, and that's what this whole design and all of the effort around it is working towards. So the program, not on Tuesday, the City Council approved the purchase of the MUD site. I think that's the last step, other than the implementation of the bonds. So we began to look at that site in January of this year, and this project scope summary addresses the modifications or the design that is currently being looked at. The overall site is the Justice Center, so I want to be clear on that. Everything that happens on that site has to do with justice, and at the beginning of the project, we termed the site the Justice Center. Now includes 8 stories for courts and attorneys and community programs, and all of the supporting elements for that. The existing MUD or building will be used. Right now we're showing probation. We need to go through and have the final meetings of all the departments, but it fits well within the size of the current building. And there'll also be community programs and a connection between the courts and the MUD building. And then the youth center, which is, I think we need to, in the community, change this perception from punishment to restorative. So this is a restorative environment, and that what's been the perception over the past 5 decades is changing. So I think in the community we need to understand that this is a different building type. So there's 4 stories. 48, we're now looking at fitting up the 64 in the project cost. So the project cost includes a fit up for 64 beds. If we find at the time of construction that those numbers have decreased appropriately, then we'll evaluate at that time whether we do fit that up. But all of the current project costs includes fitting up 64 beds. And then a skywalk connection from the court building where the attorneys are to the Hall of Justice, so they can move efficiently from their offices to the Hall of Justice. So those are the program elements. The site, I think you're all familiar with the Hall of Justice at the top. the courts building on the right side of the site, and the MUD building on the left side, and the youth center on Howard Street. So there's a public courtyard area in between the courts and the MUD building, and then the skywalk connection to the Hall of Justice. So the site, this is a site we looked at a year ago originally, and it's an excellent site directly south of the Hall of Justice, so it works out very nicely for the program that we're developing or has been developed. As far as the stacking diagram, you can see the eight levels. This is like a slice through a cake. 8 levels. The attorneys on the upper level, the courts on level 3 and 4, parking and support, parking for the judges, and community lobby on the street level. And then adjacent to that is for the youth center, lobby, housing, and then recreation on the top level.
So when you say attorneys, that would be public defender,
Public
county attorney?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, public defenders and county attorneys. And we've worked through layouts with them. This kind of is a compilation. These documents are a compilation of the project to date that shows all of the space programs and the layouts that have previously been agreed to. As I said, we need to go back and have a final meeting with all the departments. So this image is from the north, Harney looking to the south, and it's the public courtyard between the MUD building on the right and the new courts building on the left. And then at the back is a covered connector with, we think, some type of public art element. The color in that connector, we think, is a good opportunity to introduce some public. And then beyond that is the youth center. So this shows the connector to the Hall of Justice on Harney, and then the MUD building, which is really, this part is mostly Fraser Stryker offices on the left side of 17th, and then the new building. And this just shows the importance of the connectivity from the youth center to the courts. And this is an internal connector, so it makes it very easy and quick for kids to move from the youth center to the courts, to talk to an attorney or a judge if there's a question. It's also easy for the family to visit both facilities at the same time and have one single facility to take care of all the services in a secure way. Sorry. This is just a representative plan. It shows the courts on the upper right hand, 4 courtrooms per level, and all of the judges' chambers and the public spaces. The public spaces now are on the west side overlooking the courtyard, and then the judges' chambers on the east side behind the court. So a lot of conference rooms on the public side where meetings occur, so they don't have to occur in just public space. You can go in and have a private conversation, still be on the public side before you go into the courtroom. The MUD building, this is a notional layout or a layout based on space planning needs for probation. So as I said, it fits pretty nicely. We've done a walkthrough of the MUD building. Wade and our team walked through 2 days to look at the facility and the systems in the building. So they've taken really good care of the building in general. So it's a good quality building for the county to acquire. And then the youth center, and this shows 8-bed modules, which is what PREA requires now. The current facility is designed 12-bed modules, so this is to the current requirements of 8 beds. We're looking at more of a flexible system because if things change over time, the current facility is pretty difficult with all of the concrete block walls to make modifications. So we're looking at systems that could be, they're still secure and have been used in correction. It's just kind of a newer technology to allow renovation to occur more easily in the future. This shows an image of that module, again, trying to create an environment that exudes more restorative nature of the facility than punitive and punishment. Still secure, the rooms are secure, the modules are secure, the perimeter of the building is secure. But we don't have any razor wire or concertina wire. Nothing from the exterior would say anything different than urban residential. So that's what we're designing to and give our best effort in that regard. So this is an image of an individual room. The vision to the outside is through a utility space, so we can have secure glass that doesn't need to be insulated in the room, and then have insulated glass that doesn't need to be the high impact glass. So we're able to gain an economy there and have blinds in the chase side, because the blinds can get damaged easily in a room. So we can have the blinds to control the sun and the view in the chase side without having them vulnerable to damage on the interior. So there's been some benefits that have come out of that. All of the things that we're looking at, the lighting, the day lighting, the ambient lighting, the acoustics, all of those change the experience for the kids in the room. And sometimes it's subconscious, but they're there, and everybody would recognize them if they were in two different spaces. And you had poor lighting or poor acoustics, it affects the demeanor of the people. So that's really part of the trauma informed design. The other are materials, the wood and some of the furniture. And these are furniture types that we've used in other secure facilities. And then the outdoor space, right next to this is gymnasium recreation. So you come out of that recreation or up stair or elevator to this outdoor space that's visually screened on the perimeter and has natural planting. So that's essentially the design. And then we have cost that Don Molman is going to walk through.
Okay, Don?
I think one of the challenges on any project, and you may have heard me say this before, we have to put into balance the cost, the time, and the quality. We continue to do that on a regular basis, because if you think about it, one of those legs will affect the other two legs all day long. It doesn't matter which leg you're talking about. The other thing that I would just say here initially, as Chris pointed out, George and Bruce, the design way back early in school is form follows function. I think if we think about this sincerely and deeply from the standpoint is that form follows program, that's what this design is all about. We're basically building this project to serve the programs, not to serve the architecture necessarily. But our mainstay is those programs for the kids. So that's been our constant mission and our constant objective. The challenge we have in the process is, of course, is to design the budget. So we continue to do that. We manage the budget. We have a control budget. And summarily, if we kind of break down major components, and this is a very similar format that you've seen before, we have the site preparation costs. Again, this is the site clearing, the grading, some demolition work associated with the annex, ultimately with the MUD annex, and then also the parking garage. The Justice Tower, MUD, and the Skywalk really kind of goes all in hand. This is the justice portion of the program. So that contains, in essence, the courtrooms and the things, the offices and the attorneys and all the things that Bruce identified. The youth center, back to the partnership with Sherwood, we are blessed for this project to have philanthropy. In reference to the Sherwood letter, it was specific that $5 million is allocated towards programs and $5 million is allocated towards the youth center, the youth facility side of it. So that effectively lets us take a $27 million construction cost, less than $5 million, to go to a $22.5 million budget in reference. Some of the other components that we break down, telecom, there's audiovisual, technology is certainly a big part of this building. There'll be some ancillary security costs, more probably a little bit coordination with the owner's requirements, but most of that will be by separate subcontractors as part of the design process. And we have some miscellaneous items as an allowance. For the non-construction, we break down allowance for movable equipment, furnishings in essence. This isn't new desks and chairs for every office in the building, but certainly the public areas that will be, that include the lobby, the courtroom areas for the families and the waiting areas and those types of things. The architectural services, again, that's based on a 7.25% fee as originally projected and committed to. We have some relocation costs. Again, this is the revetting of the design. MUD building becomes a remodel, the program, and just the dynamics of resetting to the schematic design that we had originally completed on the library site. Independent design consultants, these are pass-through expenses, essentially under the architect, and those have had some increases also. The biggest example would be the soils report. Once we're funded, we will do another soils investigation, borings report, which will aid then, of course, the structural design for the project. And then there's some other, aspects that are outsourced in that regard also as far as specialties. Special services, the project manager is a Burlington fee. That's the 2.25% fee based on the project budget. Special services, again, geotechnical, a little bit different than the soils report under 2 above up there, B2. That's actually on-site inspections, if you will, for the subgrade and the foundations, deep foundations, and all of the logistics associated with that. Survey, we do another survey for the MUD site. Special inspections is a code requirement by an independent party. Environmental, we have a little bit of an allowance for that. Phase 1 is being done now by the county on the MUD building. That's basically the existing conditions, but we'll want to evaluate it now to make sure that when we start remodeling or taking some things down, that there's no containment that we need to be aware of, and then also for any of the demolition components of the project. Commissioning is outsourced, independent cost consultant. We have budgeted to have an independent source as we did at the schematic design or really the early programming level, do that. That's a consultant other than Kiewit. And then we have some other miscellaneous costs. The majority of that probably is in the builder's risk insurance, which would be provided by the owner in all likelihood. So effectively, with some under contingency, that takes us to a $114 million bond issue, and that's where we're committed, again, in the design to budget format. The site is outside of that. You know, I'm sure everyone's aware that's a separate bond issue just to procure the site, the entire block from NUD. So we're moving forward under, that, a lot of parts, a lot of moving parts. It's a dynamic process, but if we take today as a point in time, that's where we are at relevant to the representation that Bruce did to the architecture, and again, more importantly, back to the programs that we're modeling and building into this facility. So,
Great, thank you, Don.
Can I ask a quick question?
Uh-huh.
Sure.
So, when all this is said and done, it's going to be a GMP contract?
so that's exactly right. We'll go to market again with Kiewit as a partner in this. And Burlington's responsibility is to objectively overview. You know, again, we participate and lead some of the design discussions on a weekly basis. We have HDR, Kiewit, Burlington at the table for those. As we start to refine this, one of our critical path items is, for example, the structural steel. We'll have the deep foundations, first couple of things out of the chute. So, George, to your question, we'll continue to manage the budget accordingly to the point where we get to the final bid package, if you will, which will include the MEP, the consolidated set, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, the consolidated set all in, and that becomes then a guaranteed maximum price by Kiewit. So that's where the risk is managed. That's why the owner has contingency on this project. There will be ups and downs, but again, this will be managed very carefully to maintain the budget. We will use every effort to make sure that everything stays within that budget, and we have no surprises that would suggest otherwise at this point in time. So,
Okay, Joel?
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about next steps. Again, just to remind you, we're the project board. So the focus of this group is on the control budget for the project. That will come initially to you. That will get more robust as the cost figures come in and we get closer to getting the GMP. But effectively, the bond issues and the funding and the site come from outside this board. So you inherit all of those actions from other bodies. But this is kind of the coordinating group. Because as you can tell and know from the process so far, there's lots of governing boards involved in those decisions around the site, the location, the go, no-go. We're sort of on the execution side of all of the vision and all of the expenditures and capital budgets. So that's our role. It gets us to the point where we get to execute on some of the visions and directions that these governing bodies have given. So it's an exciting time. I did want to remind you on the contracts for the project, most of those are in form. The way the GMP contract works, that process is spelled out in the contract, and the control budget informs that, and you come back with a GMP within the budget. You have to go back to the governing bodies in the unlikely event that we can't get it across the finish line for that budget. So there were 4 documents that approved that process. Those were approved back in July of 2018. There was the owner's representative agreement that essentially created this body. The MOU that was approved between the county. So the county
Lewis. This is no, don't.
So the ancillary services agreement was also approved along with the initial reimbursement agreement. So once the funding is cleared, the next actions for you as on the execution side of the project as a board will be to do the project management agreement, the project design and engineering agreement, and then the CM at risk. And those have been drafted in draft form since last December. We will have an addendum. I'm just reminding you. We did talk about some needed changes for that. So we're going to have a consultant help us with the risk management and the insurance provisions. That is a complicated thing given insurance coverage and the number of bodies that are involved. So we want to get some help and make sure we get those addressed. There are just a couple of tweaks we need to do because the location changed. And, again, that's an advantage that this body has. We've gotten input, we've gotten some course corrections, we're going to a different site. In the traditional procurement model, that would essentially send all the public bodies back to the beginning, and you would essentially start over. Because of the project team, you don't need to do that. We've effectively been able to get that input, do the course corrections, take the problem-solving approach instead of the combat approach, and do that in a much more expedited way compared to traditional procurement at the public sector. So you might get the question, what about the site change? Were there costs associated with that? Yes, there was. We're doing 2 soil surveys. We're doing 2 site surveys, the diligence on the property. We also have a one-time line item for HDR. There's an additional architect fee so that we can put the plans to the new site. That $180,000 number appeared in the sheet that you just saw. So that's kind of it. We don't have locked in mind the timeline for when we come back next for action items for this board. But again, we are respecting the governing body input on this, and particularly the construction cost and the availability of funds to get to execution. And that's something we've all been looking forward to.
Yes. Thank you. Any comments from the board members?
I'll
PJ?
make a couple things. Just want to mention, one of the things when we talked about the youth center, I think that was at $22 million thereabouts.
27 less than 5 for
Yeah.
Sherwood.
22 to the county,
Yes, ma'am.
basically,
Yes,
to the
sir.
youth center, and that's important. Kind of ties into what I said at our board meeting publicly when Doug Kagan came up last week and Joe was talking about that. The other thing is there's still a hope that we may get an additional $5 million, and we're working at that. Maybe there'll be something else, but you don't want to count on that for certain. The other thing I want to be careful about is, with the moving out of this building, offices, which we pay rent for, we need to look at how we work together with the city to figure out who maybe's taking that space and so on in this building, because we'd be paying rent on that, and then we'll be paying rent at the other. So I think down the road, we should be talking about that to see, hey, what are some of the things that might be leased outside of this building that could then come in, and then working with your group as we go down that road, Mary Ann. And then lastly, I want to be careful about the probation group that's going into the present MUD building. And we don't need to discuss that now, but at some point, how many square feet they have, and make sure, certain that that's the right thing, and, that we're not just trying to build an expansion there. I know we're leasing outside currently.
Right.
In some pretty poor conditions from what I hear. So this will be a real positive change for them and the people they serve. So those were just some things that we should keep in mind for the future, Don, and working with you to look at all. So thank you.
And to piggyback on one of your comments about the space, that's why the building commission has the authorization of the study to happen to occur as a space study of what's left when people move out. It's also, don't forget, we just had a legislative bill that's moving through the legislature to add another district court, or district judge. So we'll need to, again, use that study to figure out how to bring them on. There's also conversation that it's one district court right now, but the need is potentially 4 total. So, again, the space needs are always going to be there. So that study will definitely help how we move things around once we get this project moving and people starting to move out.
Just add too, PJ, you mentioned the probation moving there. And it just, again, it shows how that co-location will be so beneficial to have all those services all co-located really on one site. I
Right.
mean, I know it's been said, but I think it really emphasizes that and points that out.
The thing that's been disgusting for me, and I shouldn't even say it, but I will, you know, is people keep talking about the $100 million jail. Which first of all, it offends me to say jail when it's a detention center. And I know parents of some youth there, and was with one over the weekend that commented about that. And, you know, we're seeing the right numbers, and it hasn't, in the media, been accurately reported. And it's disturbing that that kid continues to be talked about.
Mhm. Yep. Okay, any other board members? All right, we'll move to public comment, and I will remind you that you have 5 minutes of comment, and I will be timing. Any public comment? Louis?
Yes. Luis Jimenez, 518 North 40th Street. Board members, and it's not with you guys that I have a problem with this, the rest of the county, the culture of ethics in the county is lacking. And I'm not going to lecture you guys about ethics, but the first rule of ethics is know the facts. And the facts is the person's responsibility to know. And also to deal with people who are informed of facts. That's ethical behavior, and that's not what's going on in the county, especially in nonprofits and organizational structure. Madam Chair, the council members were not informed of the HDR plan when they voted on the MUD purchase. And I feel that that is an example of what I'm speaking about. I encourage everyone here on the board to inform the public of the numbers in the right time. I'm trying to do my best, and because I know that $100 million is not for detention. The vast majority of it is for the judges, which we now see it as the Justice Tower or the Justice Center, and the associated legal services that are housed together. And one last point is on co-location. Co-location, when I look at this, I see it as the programs and the juveniles being co-located. I don't see it as essential for the judges to be there in the same plot of land. So let's look at replatting. The replat is a very good tool to be in conformance with the law. And I know Mr. Rogers is concerned with the law and the co-location. Perhaps the DCYC could be replatted to suffice co-location of detention and programming. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. All right. With that, we will be, I'll look at the calendars and send out another notice for our next meeting. And with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We adjourn. Thank you. How are you?
Good.
Okay.